It doesn't have to be a Picasso. It just has to be a win. And the Raptors got the job done. Let's talk about it.
This is the Raptors Postcast, your instant game reaction for the Toronto Raptors. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this episode of the Raptors Postcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number one sports podcast network covering your team every day. Coming to you live after the Raptors 110-98 win over the Portland Trailblazers on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Locked On Podcast feed. I'm Zulfi, Sheikh, credentialed journalist covering the NBA and the Raptors for over 2 years now on outlets like Raptors Republic and Sportsnet. And now I'm one of your humble hosts on the Raptors Postcast, breaking down each and every game with you. And with me is Duane Notice, a.k.a. Dino, professional basketball player and analyst. Duane has represented Canada. He's been part of the Raptor system with the 905, and he's still hooping professionally in leagues like the CEBL. And on tonight's show, we are going to talk about how the Raptors found a way to squeeze out a win and secure a road trip winning record. We'll break down Scottie Barnes' late turnaround from a slow start, get some thoughts from our resident pro with a segment we like to call Take Notice, and then we'll wrap things up by handing out our player of the game. All right, Duane, this is going to be a fun one, I think, to talk about because I thought I'm going to throw this to you really quick, but I thought Matt the broadcast said something really nice, and I teed it off earlier here. He said it doesn't have to be a Picasso. It just needs to be a win. And I think players can appreciate this a lot, but so can fans, that this Raptors team has been able to squeak out a couple ugly victories these last couple of games. But at the end of the day, they're stacking wins. And for a young team that's putting itself in a good playoff position, that's kind of the most important thing, isn't it?
It's always the most important thing. We play this game to win. So going out there on the road trip is always a luxury when you're able to squeeze out a win, no matter how you get it done. And a victory is a victory. They're not going to remember how it happened. They're just going to see a W in the win column at the end of the day. So shout out to the Raptors for being able to do that. But it was a tough game all around. It seemed like they were struggling. By the end of the day, they are always in the driver's seat. So you like the back and forth intensity. It felt like a nail biter all game. And even though Portland continued to try and close the gap, it still felt like the Raptors were somewhat in control. And when you have a game where they're have an advantage in the points when it comes to points in the paint, 64-46, then you know you're going to have good things happening for you. So the Raptors did a great job, to the credit of them, of figuring it out, being resilient, getting into the paint and making things happen, as opposed to being, settling, which we saw a lot of in the third quarter when that zone kind of came up to be a trouble for them. But you like the way they played all around together and the resiliency. It's on the road, man. Business trips, getting it done. What else can you ask for?
Yeah, the Raptors were able to secure a winning road record with that. They're 3-1 right now. They have one more game on this road trip before they head back to Toronto. And I think entering this road trip, they were leaking oil a little bit. You had lost that overtime game to the Clippers. It wasn't necessarily great. James Harden kind of took care of you late, even though the Raptors led for a bit of that game. They started pretty flat against the Lakers, who junked it up with that zone defense, and the Raptors had no answer. But what do? They take on a hot shooting Warriors team who, yes, was without Jimmy Butler that game, but the Raptors found a really hot shooting night of their own and were able to take care of business. The Sacramento Kings, they rallied from down 12, were able to figure out that zone, and they got the win there. Again, you can look at it from both sides and say, well, the Raptors shouldn't have been down to the Sacramento Kings, who are the 14th team in the West. But like you said, at the end of the day, it's about getting the job done, not necessarily how sometimes. And then this game, you could look at it from the perspective of like, well, the Blazers are a bottom 10 offense, and they were missing Deni Avdija, their leading scorer, who puts up over 26 points a game and was probably going to be an all-star. So you can see that as like an excuse, but the Raptors can also say, hey, we're missing guys, and the Blazers were the hottest team in the league. They entered this game 9-2 in January and were on a 4-game win streak. So whether with or without Deni Avdija, the Blazers clearly have impact players. Shaedon Sharpe, shout out London, Ontario, guy from Canada. He had a really good game for the Blazers here. He popped off in the second quarter for 13 points, but then the Blazers as a whole in the third quarter were really trying to get back into this game. They cut it down to 2 points by the end of the third quarter, and the Raptors were able to rely on their leaders late. We'll talk about Scottie Barnes more in a second. You had Brandon Ingram, who started off kind of slow himself. He was scoreless in the first quarter. He really was doing everything else during this game. Very good on the glass. I thought he was stout defensively. And then you had a guy like Emmanuel Quickly steady. Another game for him where he was kind of steadying the ship along the way. So for them to find solutions, I think that's more important than necessarily it being a perfect game. I don't think that needs to be the goal for this team, especially on this road trip when they're shorthanded. It's about finding solutions. And right now, I see 3 games in a row that aren't just wins, but they're finding different ways to win in them. And I think that's the most impressive thing.
Yeah, it's very impressive. Like you said, finding solutions. I like that. And you know what? Brandon Ingram never ceases to amaze me. I mean, every game it feels like he's being the bailout guy, like I mentioned. But I got to give flowers to his playmaking ability. There was a couple times I saw when he got an offensive rebound, kicked it out too quickly. He made the trail three, which helped stop the bleeding when they were kind of, going on that run with the Portland Trailblazers. But then he was able to do a nice little a 2-dribble pull up to the left by the bench over a fader by over double team. And I like that a lot because Brandon Ingram gets paid the big bucks to make those big shots. So again, you say the guys that are normally here showing up, doing what they're supposed to be doing, and it's a mission well done by him. But just flowers to everybody, man, because everybody else stepped up. You talked about quickly. It was a little odd not seeing that 2-guard front between him and Shed today, but because RJ returning, which is also a good thing because now you have more size in the perimeter. It kind of messes with the flow and chemistry of that, but quickly was still able to get it done. So shout out to him to being able to kind of be that guy that has been reliant on this road trip.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the quickly Shed connection and it not being a go-to so much in this game because, like you said, RJ came back to the lineup. It was his first game back after missing 7 games in a row, and I think that's been an understated part of this. It's not just the fact that yes, the Raptors are missing guys; it's that has forced Darko Rajovic to really have to try different things every game. I believe this was the 10th straight game the Raptors had a different starting lineup, which is just insane and difficult for any team to deal with that kind of lack of continuity. So when you bring RJ Barrett back, that is a positive thing. But then a guy like Jamal Shed has to adjust entirely, who was starting the last couple of games, right? And then he has to figure out who is he fitting in alongside. He had a pretty quiet game by his standards the last couple of games, but that's just what's going to happen when you have guys coming back into the lineup. And then RJ Barrett was able to be somewhat impactful in his return. But I wanted to talk specifically about the zone defense because we know it was going to come up. The Blazers, they did it interesting. It wasn't like the Kings that kind of went to it right away. Instead, the Blazers, a team that zones up, I think the 4th or 3rd most in the NBA, they decided to wait. They waited till the second half, waited for that halftime adjustments and conversations to happen, and then they broke out that zone, and it was able to find them a bit of success. They outscored the Raptors in the 3rd quarter, and it was their version of throwing a punch basically in this game. What did you see from what the Blazers did with that zone and then how the Raptors were able to eventually respond to it?
Well, because the Blazers are so young, they have that athleticism, especially on the perimeter. So for the zone, they're extremely active. They use their hands. They're able to close the gaps. And I think they stuck to the scouting report. They left the Raptors open on the perimeter and forced them to settle. And I think they got comfortable at a point. Obviously, they've been making a lot of shots over the last couple of games recently. So for the Raptors, they were in rhythm, but they just were not hitting. But shout out to Grady Dick because he came off the bench and he felt like a zone buster every time he hit a shot. It felt super loud and it was super needed. So I think that the Raptors just got to find a way to not settle, not be hesitant. Try to get into the teeth and the gap of the zone by putting Scottie Barnes. We call that the middle of the zone, which is the nail, which is right there at the free throw line. And then he can make those great decisions. He doesn't have to always settle for outside shots, but it's just getting in and out the zone. But I think the Portland Trailblazers did a good job because they kind of did an unconventional style of zone where it was more of like a 1-2-2 and kind of a matchup zone. And I think that's why it kind of disrupted the Raptors because it was a little bit different from the zones that we've been seeing from the other opposing teams over this last road trip. But like you said, it was a mental mind game. Basketball is somewhat like chess. So instead of the Trailblazers doing what other teams have been doing by instituting the zone early in the first quarter or right off the bat, they waited. And as the Raptors, they got comfortable in transition, got comfortable in the half-court offense. And then once that switch was flipped, it kind of, threw the Raptors off balance.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you made. And I think it's a reminder for all of us that, like, yes, the Raptors are figuring it out and they've had some trouble against zones, but not every zone's going to look the same. And I think seeing the Portland Trailblazers play zone versus the Sacramento Kings play zone is very different. With all due respect to the Kings, some of that zone was just bad defense at the end of the day with how they were going about it versus like you said, the Blazers, much more athletic. There's a lot more length moving around. And then when you have a big man like Donovan Clingan kind of roaming in the paint and waiting there, that's very different than what the Kings had to offer in their version of it. But again, the Raptors were able to scrap it out from a variety of ways and find answers to it, which I think was the most impressive part of it all. I want to quickly touch, before we move on to our turning point of the game, on RJ Barrett, because obviously he did make his return in this game. It felt like his burst necessarily wasn't the same, but he was able to still get those bully drives a little bit, a couple kickouts, finished with 10 points on 4 of 9 shooting, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. From a player's perspective, seeing him return from injury, what did you take from his comeback?
I think it's very difficult for a guy like RJ Barrett or any player in his situation to just be in and out of the lineup because of these nagging injuries. That ebbs and flows what comes with being a basketball player. You can't avoid it. But for him, just trying to establish a rhythm is going to be difficult. But I liked his aggression. Obviously, he took a lot of outside shots, but I think his penetration, especially when they stopped the momentum in the second half, he had a nice drive, kick out to Battle in the corner who made that three. RJ's always a good playmaker, especially when he's driving downhill. He had a nice and one as well. So his bread and butter is when he's putting his shoulder downhill and going towards the basket. So for him, a couple more minutes. I know he's on minutes restriction, but just getting that rhythm, it'll come back to him, getting his lungs under him, getting his feet under him. And I think that's one of the reasons why he got out in the first quarter with early foul trouble. We saw those 2 quick fouls just because he wasn't really able to stay in front of his man and keep his man from attacking him off the dribble. But again, that comes with time. We're not worried about that. We know RJ is capable. We know he's going to put the work in. We know he's athletic. We know he's strong. And for him, he's going to continue to get shots up. He's going to continue to make an impact on the game. Even if he's not scoring at a high level, I still like the fact that he still has that dog mentality. And for him, sometimes that's infectious. A guy like him is a high motor, and he's a guy that's, like I said, a dog. And that is what something the rest of the Raptors could feed off of.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And when you speak to him having that dog mentality, you really do see a guy like RJ Barrett, and his instincts always generally lead him in the right direction. Again, you said he was a bit slow footed in this game at times. Like you said, coming back from injury, it is an adjustment. This is his second major injury of the season. He missed like 20 some odd games already with a separate injury. So for him to go through 2 of those this year, I think that is going to be something where you kind of have to give him some grace. But there was this play I believe it was the end of the second quarter where IQ gave an overhead pass to Scottie Barnes, who got a turnaround or a short roll, like a jump shot. And then it was a miss, but RJ Barrett just bullied his way in, steamrolled to the basket, tipped it in. Those are the instincts and the nose for finding the ball that, like, even if he doesn't necessarily have his legs under him just yet, you know he's going to be making the right decisions. He was still getting to good spots on the floor. And I think that eventually would just lead him success in the game when the Raptors and him kind of acclimate to each other again.
Yeah, you're talking about smart decisions. I mean, think about it. That was at the end of the quarter, right? So him crashing the basket doesn't put his team at a disadvantage because there's no other time for the team to score. So making that decision was pretty cool. Seeing how athletic he got up there, it was using his right hand, so that's his offhand. But again, the instincts is what we talk about with RJ Barrett, and we're not worried about him on the offensive end because he's going to get to it. That's what his nature and bread and butter is. So just give him a couple more games to get his legs up under him. Give him some grace, like you said. His conditioning has to come back, and we'll see him be able to stay in front of guys and be an amazing two-way player like we know he can be.
I think that's a really good point, and I'm sure the Raptors will give him that grace to get going. And for those wondering, looking at this score, 110-98, why we're talking about this like it was a 2-point game, it's because this game wasn't necessarily perfect or pretty for the Raptors. They were able to maintain a 7-point lead basically into halftime, even though they were shooting like under 40% from the field and under 40% from 3, because the Blazers just happened to have a much more awful offensive showing. Now you can say some of that was the Raptors because the Raptors quote unquote held the Blazers to 12 points in the first quarter. But when your opponent is shooting 2 of 20 from the field and start 0 of 10 from 3, like your defense can take some credit, but I don't think you can take all the credit in that necessarily. It's just a team is slow to start the game. But again, the Raptors took the Blazers' best punch in the second half. It was because they went into that zone. They junked it up. Shaedon Sharpe, again, had a really good, strong third quarter. But then when it came down to it, I think the turning point in this game very much was Scottie Barnes. So I think it's time for us to really touch on that.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
So I'll throw it to you here, Duane, quick, but I'll set it up in the sense that basically this game, the Raptors went into the fourth quarter with, I believe, a 2-point lead. The Blazers start off hot in the fourth. It was Donovan Clingan where he grabbed one of his very many offensive rebounds in this game. I think that was like his 7th of the game at the time. Puts it back up. Blazers all of a sudden are leading 78-76. And that's when Scottie Barnes woke up in this game. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, yeah. I think I texted you and said, "Man, Scottie's been a little quiet right now." But at the right time, he came in and he went to work. I mean, man, he dished it to Mamu down the middle for a nice drive where it was a nice little 3. But then he also was intentional about just, I think, getting to the basket, right, and being more aggressive and showing up when his team needed him most. He had that nice move in the paint, reminded me of Hakeem Olajuwon with the footwork. Nice, beautiful pivot and spin on the 7-footer, letting him know what his favorite late night snacks is, and that's big lays. But Scottie was a beast down there. I mean, on the offensive glass, he was especially after that late shot clock inbound miss from Quickly. He got the rebound, clutch, much needed effort. And I mean, 9 points in that quarter. I mean, what more can you ask for? You know, when you need your superhero to show up when it matters most, he did that. So Scottie Barnes, with that activity, we knew he was going to show up, his length. And then on top of that, not only was he scoring the rock, but the 6 blocks was incredible.
Wow.
6 return to senders, man. I mean, he was handing out invitations all night to his own personal block party. So shout out to Scottie Barnes for doing it on both ends. We talk about it on a consistent basis. And Mamu, after the game, said shout out to him for being a potential defensive player of the year. I'm not mad at that statement at all. The way he's able to guard versatility-wise 1 through 5. We saw a couple of great blocks from the first half, but in the second half, the 2 at the end of the quarter, at the end of the game, was just exceptional. So, man, shout out to Scottie Barnes, because I think that he's playing at a high level. And even when he was kind of struggling with the shot throughout the first half of the game, I think he did a good job of being a great leader at the end of the game by bringing it home for his troops.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to sum it up. Like, Scottie Barnes entered the fourth quarter with 4 points and 2 of 9 shooting. And in some ways, you can see leadership is like, other guys are hot, I'm going to get them going. But I think what Scottie sensed was that the Raptors were struggling against that zone a little bit. I think the first 4 possessions against it, especially in that third quarter, they settled for jumpers every time. But in the fourth quarter, it was very intentional about finding him inside, or him working his way to the paint. His first basket was when Emmanuel Quickley and him pushed the pace. It got Scottie a nice deep post entry pass against a tilted defense against Donovan Clingan, and he dunked it over the 7-footer. And then a couple plays later, he drives it in, kicks, finds Mamu for a 3. A couple plays after that, he grabs an offensive rebound after blowing by a couple defenders, puts it back up, and all of a sudden the Raptors have a 5-point lead after they're down 2 following the Donovan Clingan basket. That's a leader understanding the moment, understanding the urgency and what his team is looking for. And like you said, on the defensive end, Scottie Barnes, I think, has very much crossed all defense territory. Like you said, defensive player of the year, I think, should be in the conversation if the Raptors can maintain a top 5 defense. And his blocks tonight were highlight worthy, man. Those last worthy, and like you said, were great. But he had one where he kind of jumped past Donovan Clingan because he got the pump fake. And as he's like landing, he turns around and uses his offhand to rip the ball out. That is next level athleticism. And I'm sure as an athlete yourself, you can appreciate just how much body control and instincts a play like that takes, that only so many athletes have.
Yeah, his instincts are incredible. Like you said, the way he was contorting his body in the air, and just that the awareness that he has right in the paint, I think around the basket, is just so amazing to see as a player. You recognize it, you appreciate it. He's one of those players where it's like, you're thankful he's on your side, and one of those guys that when you play against him, you hate to go against him. So I think Scottie does a great job of just making his presence be known in the paint. And yes, the Raptors were kind of lacking in size. We saw that sometimes when it came to the second chance rebounding opportunities. However, they still make up for it in heart. They rotate at a high level, and Scottie is always there on the backside as secondary help, defending his line. And I think that's a big thing to be noted, because yes, he could score all the points, but when you have a leader that's willing to lay it on the line on the defensive end, it really inspires everybody else to kind of do better. And we saw that. And we know Grady Dick is not the best defender, but when you see a guy like Scottie lining up and putting on the line, it inspires you to want to do better, move your feet, move the puppies, as we say, and guard your yard. So shout out to Scottie for being the head of the snake on the defensive end.
Yeah, I think you put it well there. And speaking of puppies and moving your feet, coming up in a bit here, we're going to talk about Grady Dick and Ochai Agbaji. The Kansas Jayhawks, they united and had arguably their best games of the seasons. We're going to talk about it as we continue this episode of the Raptors Postcast. All right, this episode of the Raptors Postcast is brought to you by Gametime. During basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building, the energy, the crowd, the first big run that gets everyone on their feet. If you were watching that Raptors game, there was a lot of Raptors jerseys and fans cheering "Let's go Raptors," even though this game was in Portland. I love the road support. Fans want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. And that's where Gametime comes in. Gametime app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets. It's fast, simple, and without guesswork. You browse the Gametime app because it's straightforward and intuitive. Finding tickets takes just a few taps. You can see the view from your seat, and before buying, you can make choices that are easy and confident. Prices and fees are upfront, so the total is clear. And with zone deals, you can help even unlock greater seats at better value. So whether it's an NBA game or another live event, everything is right there in one place. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays always feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. You open the FanDuel app during NBA Happy Hour, and it always brings something new, whether that's boost, bonuses, and surprises. The timing is perfect because it's right before games, right before the weekend starts. It adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. I don't know about you guys, but it is a late night game for the Raptors, so any reason to add any extra energy and juice while we're watching this late night win, I think you got to take it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, Duane, as we continue this episode of the Raptors Postcast, everybody be sure to check out Sean Woodley with Locked On Raptors, coming to you with more in-depth analysis of this Raptors 110-98 victory. And for those tuning in for the first time, now is our time for the Take Notice segment, where we go to our resident pro, Duane Notice, for his observations on the game. All right, Duane, let us know what you're watching this time.
All right, today's Take Notice segment is the Jayhawks uniting. I mean, their connection was outstanding. I want to show love to Grady Dick, like I mentioned, for his outing in tonight's game on the road. 10 points and high-level percentage from the field. And I think that his play was outstanding because it outdid his stats. I mean, all his buckets felt loud, like I said. And whether it was a reverse layup that felt Kyrie-esque in the first quarter that showed his continued athleticism, or like I mentioned, whenever Portland got into his zone, it felt like Grady was the answer to kind of get them out there and hit those threes and be accurate from the land of beyond. But it wasn't just Grady Dick, man. He did a great job on the offensive end, but you got to shout out Abaji, his Jayhawk brother. And they had an excellent highlight where Grady Dick threw the over-the-lob pass, which was sweet. Abaji caught it with two hands, finished it with one. Style points aren't 100 for that one, but Abaji also had an impactful game, man. It was an efficient 10 points off the bench, and he was a pest on defense, which we continue to talk about his effort on that end. He played like he belonged out there, which I think was the most important thing for him, but the hustle plays were outstanding, and they had combined 20 of the 23 bench points for the Raptors. So again, a big outing for the Jayhawks and their connection. And again, Grady Dick is impressing me every game with his effort on the defensive end. There was a play in the first half where he was guarding Love, and he forced a turnover when Love tried to take him off the dribble on an island, one-on-one going baseline, and Grady Dick guarded his own yard. I could continue to talk about that. Pride right there is great because we know he can shoot the ball at a high level, but when he's sitting down and really taking his matchup seriously on defense, it's really a great sight to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, 20 points for them combined, 9 of 13 shooting combined for them too. So also super efficient and just doing all the little on the floor along the way. And that's what you want to see from these guys, whether you're a believer of these, they can be part of this rotation moving forward, or if you want to take the approach of like the trade deadline's nearing, you want these guys to get their value up, whichever side you're on, you want these guys to be playing well for a shorthanded Raptors team. And I think they're showing what they're capable of when the chemistry is there, when the connection's there. And like you said before, Duane, when the confidence is there. I think the biggest thing for Grady Dick specifically is, like you said, the activity. He's not letting himself be stagnant. He's not letting himself stand around a lot. Whether it was breaking the zone, I think his shots that he got against his own defense weren't standstill, weren't necessarily catch and shoot. He was coming off curls or pin downs and stuff like that. Again, that transition connection with Ochai Agbaji, if you go a couple transition plays before that, it was him leaking out and getting a dunk down himself. And that stuff we haven't necessarily seen from Grady Dick all the time. And a big thing for him coming into the NBA and during his first couple seasons was the fatigue of it all. Was his body able to manage the physicality of it consistently? And for him to be able to chain performances like this together, I believe this was his 5th out of 6 games where he put up 10 plus points. For him to find those things where he's stacking performances like this, I think it goes a long way for his outlook. I think it goes a long way for what the Raptors see in him. And I think it's just another milestone in the right direction for him. So if you look at these guys and their prospects and what they could be for this team, like where do you stand on Grady Dick and Ochai Agbaji with the Raptors?
Especially Grady Dick, I think because he's so young, the ceiling hasn't been met for him yet. So there's still some improvement for him to be made, especially when it comes to his skill set and everything else, putting it all together. But he's certainly capable, and I'm really impressed with his game. And I think for him, as being one of those guys who are known to be a shooter, one of the things I notice about basketball players is that when you have a great stroke and you're able to shoot the ball at a high level, it provides all these advantages for you because that's what teams want to take away from you. So if Grady Dick is able to figure out other ways to implement himself into the offense via running in transition or via streaking or cutting cutting to the basket and getting some of those cheap, 2-point baskets, I think that he'll be highly effective. And you mentioned it, he's not just a spot up shooter. Some of the threes that he hit today was off of movement. It looked like Reggie Miller. Matter of fact, he looked like Dame Lillard in his prime in Portland, coming off the high screens and hitting those shots, which are very difficult to hit off the move when you're going at full speed like that. But shout out to him, like I said, for doing a great job. And Abaji, I think his potential is also through the roof because, guys, he's young. He's ready to play with urgency. I think you cannot teach that type of motor. A guy that's selfless, a guy that's not only caring about just wanting to score all the points or get all the assists or fill up the stats buckets, but a guy that actually takes it personal when he's guarding somebody. So for him, when you already have a guy that has a mentality of defense, I feel like teaching them some things on offense. We've seen it with guys like Brook Lopez improve their three-point shooting. We've seen it with guys like Aaron Gordon who've improved their three-point shooting. So I'm not worried about the ceiling for Abaji and his offensive ability as well as Grady Dick. I'm more so concerned with how they continue to develop on the defensive end. I think they've been doing that. So the potential is high. The ceiling for them is high. And I'm ready to see what else they can do as games continue to progress.
Yeah, you think, especially, again, getting closer to the trade deadline, these guys are going to get more run, more opportunity to prove themselves, and that's something you're going to see play out one way or the other. And look, I feel like it'd be disingenuous to say that Ochai Agbaji has had a great season. He's gone through his up and downs, and it's something he's working on, to your point. But at the same time, this is a guy, like you said, he had arguably his best season of his career last year, especially shooting from the three ball. And to come to this year with a uncertain spot in the rotation, to then also basically every night he doesn't know how many minutes he's going to play. And if you are looking to trade this guy, he's probably thinking, well, then why am I not getting to play all the time? Because I want to showcase myself if that's the case, because he's playing for a second contract, right? Like whether it's with the Raptors or with another team, he's probably like, the more I play, the more I can earn like my next deal or what it's going to be financially. So to like play, I guess, devil's advocate to the people that are saying that like Ochai Agbaji hasn't been all that great, I think it's also tough circumstances for him. So for him to be able to work through that, for better or for worse, I think is important. And for him to be having a game like he did, again, reuniting with his fellow Kansas Jayhawk, for them to find that chemistry together, whatever it takes for them to put together these kind of performances, I think it's better for all parties involved, whether that's him sticking with the Raptors or not. So we'll see how it goes. Again, there's financials involved with it at the end of the day. It's always going to be a thing. The Raptors trying to duck the luxury tax. Ochai Agbaji may or may not be a casualty of it. But as long as he's putting up performances like this, it's going to make it a harder decision for the Raptors. And that's the position you want to be in as a front office of a young team that's figuring things out at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, when you're a young player, all you can do is play your hardest. You can't afford to take plays off. You don't have that luxury. You haven't put that time in the league. So for him, you love to see the fact that he has that approach. And like you said, a guy like him knows he has to showcase himself not only for the Raptors, but for other teams. And he's doing that by proving his value outside of just being an offensive talent. We know he can shoot the three ball. He did it last season. But again, as a player, you want to figure out ways, like we talked about, figure out ways to win. As players, you want to figure out ways how to stay on the floor. And for him, I think he's figured out his niche, which is to be one of those pests on defense and be an aggressor on the defensive end and hold your own, get rebounds, and hustle at all times, run the floor, and use his youth to his advantage.
Absolutely. All right, Duane, it is time for us to talk about our player of the game, and I think this is going to be a tough discussion.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
I feel like every game we've covered so far since we started this show, it's been harder and harder to pick the player of the game because there's been more and more contributions up and down the roster. Now, I'm not going to just rattle off all the numbers like I did last time, but I'll give you a couple players to consider here. I know we talked about the Jayhawks. We talked a bit about Brandon Ingram and what he was able to do and after a slow start. But two players that stand out to me, and I'm not going to, like Scottie Barnes, he came up late, but I think two guys who were there all game that deserve to be in the running for the player of the game here was Sandro Mamukelashvili, 22 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 9 of 15 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3. He was active throughout the whole game. If you're talking about zone buster, he was there, timely shots as well. And then Emmanuel Quickly, 20 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals for him, by the way, 9 of 15 shooting. I believe he started 4 of 4 from the field. He was really juicing the offense early on with Mamu. So those are two players that stand out to me. If you want to go a different direction, feel free. But if you had to pick between those two for the player of the game, where are you leaning right now?
Man, I'm leaning towards Mamu. I keep saying it, Mamu, that dude. But back-to-back 20 burgers, it's hard to get that in the league. So shout out to him for doing that. But 22 points, 6 rebounds, and man, 4 assists. He's shooting the ball at a high level, 50% from the three-point line, 3 for 6. And like you mentioned it, he was steady Freddie. Remember Fred VanVleet that used to play for the Raptors? He was super calm, poised. And I felt like that's the approach that Mamu had today. man, he was taking shots, and I can't blame him. When you're open, let it fly. So for him, I think that, man, he's playing at a high level. I can't go anybody else. His effort was there all game, and 35 minutes. Come on, 35 minutes. He's not used to playing this much tick, man. So for him to be able to do it at a consistent level, guarding his man, he was guarding a 740. He was battling down there, trying to get rebounds. He was active, controlled tips and taps. He was getting dunks. He was making wide open shots. He was being a backbreaker, and he was just continuing to kind of keep the momentum on the Raptors side. So shout out to Mamu, because he's playing basketball at an extremely high level. I don't know what kind of coffee he's been sipping every morning this month, but I need some of that because, geez, he's balling.
Yeah. Hey, we know Darko's a big coffee espresso guy. Maybe he hooked Mamu up with some new beans and it got him juiced up. Who knows? But like you said, he's balling. And again, it's especially important because he's doing it for an undermanned Raptors team. I know we keep saying it, but we don't know when Jakob Poeltl is going to be back, truthfully. He saw a specialist on Thursday. We're not sure about an update there. CMB, I believe he was questionable entering this game, but ultimately ruled out. So hopefully that means he's back against OKC, or at least relatively soon. But until that happens, having Sandro Mamukelashvili not just starting, but contributing to the level that he is. Again, we have people saying that he might be a top 4 player on this team right now, which I don't think is far-fetched by any means, is huge for the Raptors. And then when you take in the context of the fact that he's basically on a minimum deal for this team, it's like a 2-year, $5.5 million deal. And there's a player option for next year, and there's no shot that he picks it up because he's going to get paid in free agency. Hopefully it's with the Raptors, but it's been a while since the Raptors have had a real bargain free agent contribute to this level. So for him to do it at this consistency right now, it's just doing so many positive things for the Raptors. And it's a win all around for him, for the team, for the front office. And that's kind of what you need for a team like this.
Yeah, and he poses such a threat, right? Because of the ability to shoot the ball at a high level. But we saw a couple of the plays today. He's not hunting his shot. The way he's playing is he's setting back screens, and because the other player, whether it's Brandon Ingram, who's coming off that UCLA cut or that Butler cut towards the post so he can get a post up, or Scottie, they're following him. So those players are doing a great job of drawing too, which is leaving Mamu wide open when he pops back out. And we saw that was the case for one of his trail threes. You saw that for the case with one of his slot threes in the first half. But man, shooting it with confidence. I love his shot selection because he's mixing it up, right? We talked about Scottie Barnes with that steady dose of or diet of shots. I think Mamu's doing a great job of getting in the paint, a couple up fakes. You got a couple of finishes in the dunker spot, being available, great hands, catching the ball. I mean, man, you can't complain. But like you said, he's showcasing himself at a high level. I don't know if it's fair to say he's overachieving, because I definitely do think he's always been a talented player, but man, he is playing at such a high level. Like you said, this man is about to get paid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up his shot diet, because I think when you think of a guy like Mamu, like you said, you've seen a talent in the past and then maybe not necessarily the opportunity. You think it's just that he's going to be allowed to shoot more and he's going to let it fly. And he is shooting more, obviously, with the Raptors, but it's him being patient within the offense and playing within the flow. I think against Donovan Clingan, he was really reading and reacting whenever Donovan went into a drop coverage, and he knew he had the space. It wasn't like I need to shoot every single time. He was willing to make passes, like you said, with 4 assists. He was able to make different reads out of it as well. So for him to not just look at it as blinders on, I have to go out there and do the one thing and be patient within it, I think it speaks to how comfortable he feels with this team, how confident he feels in his role. And that's what you want from guys who are going to be in and out of a starting lineup position to being on the bench. It's whether I'm starting or coming off the bench or playing 20 minutes or 35 minutes, I know my job is to make the right decisions for this team and be within the offense. And I think that's a credit, again, to him, to the team, to Darko, and just overall what this team has accomplished so far.
Yeah, for sure. And you used 2 great words that I want to piggyback off of. You said confidence and you said comfortability. And I think that is one of the things that's being reciprocated from his teammates. How many times has Brandon Ingram or Scottie Barnes or Quickly or anybody else given the ball to Mamu and trusted him with that opportunity to take that shot? That's a big thing for a big man. When you have guards that are willing to kick it out to you, knowing that they could probably hit the shot. How many times have we seen Brandon Ingram take or make tough shots? But there's some situations where he's like, no, here you go, big fella, let it fly. And that does a lot and does wonders. And then shout out to Darko as well, because his offense is an equal opportunity offense. And I think that you could eat, because he plays a 4-out kind of 1 in, sometimes a 5-out offense, which allows the big men from the trail spot to eat, or from the wing or from the slot to eat. So if you do your job at a high level, you're going to be left open, and you're going to be able to make and capitalize on opportunities. And you said a great thing earlier. Not only is it about just having the skill set or the mindset or the mentality, but it's also about when that is able to meet up with the opportunity. And the opportunity is here, and he's risen to that challenge.
Absolutely. And like you said, Darko Rakovic, egalitarian offense, Second game in a row where at least 4 players had 15 plus points. It just speaks to how all these guys are feeling on this road trip so far and taking advantage of it for an impressive win. All right, Duane, we're about to wrap it up here. Any final thoughts on the Raptors picking up this 110-98 win? That's 3 wins in a row. They're 3-1 on this road trip now, heading into OKC.
I think it's just super commendable for them. They have to pat themselves on the back. The road trip is obviously not over, so you cannot get too complacent. But at the same time, they have to give themselves some credit for what they've been able to do with being undermanned and being able to be on the road, not sleeping in their own beds, and finding a way to dig out these victories. I think is something to be said about those Raptors, and they got to take notice, man. They got to be on watch. The league has to see how they've been playing as of late. And man, like I said, it's just commendable to see how hard they've been fighting out there, and I'm excited to see what they do for the rest of this month.
I am as well, and I like that little take notice plug. That's a nice pun there. All right, that'll do it for us. For myself, Zulfi, Sheikh, and Duane Notice. Thank you to everyone who tuned in live. This is our last 10 p.m. tip-off Eastern, so it's going to be a bit earlier. We're not going to be up so late, but everyone that did tune in, thank you so much. We appreciate it. So if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to Locked On Raptors on all platforms. And don't forget to comment below if you have any more thoughts on the Raptors 110-98 victory. But we will be back on Sunday live after the Raptors visit Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the defending champion Oklahoma City Thunder to wrap up this road trip. A big measuring stick game for them. And we will see you then on the Raptors Postcast. Peace.